Hello and welcome back to Chatting with Chaz. I am so excited about this episode, y'all. This is a dream episode with my friend Lysas TerKeurst.
Well, and it's a dream for me too, Chaz. So
I can't even believe it.
It's a great day.
We've
been trying to do this for such a long time.
Yes.
And one thing after another kept interrupting us, but today's the day.
Today's the day. And I almost called you like at 4 o'clock yesterday. We're in the middle of a move. A lot of you were following along. And I was like, Douglas, should I call Lysa and just see if there's another date? And as it was out of my mouth, I thought, no, this is the day. We are not rescheduling this. We jumped in the car. We headed your way.
I'm so glad
and
you did.
And it's so good to be here. I mean, this home is stunning. And I feel like what's most impressive about your home, a lot of people follow you and they see your beautiful home, is you feel you when you walk in. And you see healing in this home. It's like healing unfolding before your eyes. And that's how I felt as we walked through this beautiful space. It feels like a place of refreshment and you feel like the Spirit of God here and you just feel like home.
Thank you.
So thank you for having me in your home.
I feel like it's a home when you walk in and you feel like the house speaks to you and says, welcome home.
It does say welcome.
And whenever
home.
People go and say that they're looking at different houses, and they're like, maybe they're buying a house or renting a house or whatever, I always get this sense. I always say, like, when you walk in, you want to make sure that place, when you open the door, says welcome home. And if it doesn't, it's not your house.
It is not your house. It's funny you say that. I didn't even know we were going to begin talking about the whole house thing. But when we went looking for our home together, the first house we looked at was the one we bought. And I walked in and those doors opened and I felt it. And I was like, this is our home. And it felt like a welcome home moment. We went and looked at 10 other houses and then we came back to that one and we just knew. So just like what you're saying. And I'm so inspired by being in this home to be more intentional in our home. There's a few ideas I'm going to steal. We'll talk about that later. The dining room, special memory frames. But anyway, let me introduce to you Lysa. I know most of you know her. This is my friend. She is a best-selling author, incredible writer, and a phenomenal woman of faith. She inspires me. If you would ask me who inspires me and who I would have, if someone asked me 3 years ago, is there anyone you want to meet or talk to? Who would that be? Who inspires you? It would be you, Lysa.
I remember one of our first conversations, you said that the day before you had done some speaking thing.
Yes.
And they asked you, who would you like to meet? And I think you said Justin Bieber.
Yeah.
But then...
I was going to say it was a close call between you and Justin Bieber.
And then the next day, you corrected it on your social media. And you said, I take it back, I take it back. And I was like, wow, this is impressive.
Justin Bieber, Lysas TerKeurst. But truly, you know the story, but I will share briefly the story. I was going through one of the most challenging times in my life. And I had heard of you. I had kind of watched you, but life was busy. I never had time to really sit and read a book. I was always like, one day I'm going to read a book from Lysa. And everyone would say to me, you have to read her books. And I'd be like, yes, I need to do that. I need to do that. I never did it. My sister, I was in probably the darkest place in my life. And my sister sent me a book. She's never sent me a book ever. I think the only book I read before this, to be honest, was the story of Michael Jackson. Possibly. I was just not an avid reader.
I'm up there with all the male music superstars.
That's my influence. Michael Jackson and Bieber. Yes, you're in good company. So she's like, just pause your life and read this book. So one night I'd been crying. I put the kids to bed and I was like, Lord, what am I going to do? And that book was sitting on my side table. I couldn't sleep. I picked up that book and It's Not Supposed to Be This Way. Is that the title?
Yep.
It isn't supposed to be this way. And that's how I felt. I kept saying that. I'm like, but it's not supposed to be like this. And all these dreams are shattered. And, how do you pick up the pieces? And I think I got through the introduction and I was weeping. And I thought, there's another person in the world. She's ahead of me, but she is walking through this and she got through this and maybe I'm going to be okay. And it was you. And I called my sister the next morning really early. I stayed up all night and I read the book and I said, I read her book. There's another person out there. I'm going to be okay. And she's like, oh no, you're going to be okay. And you know what else? One day you're going to meet her. And she's like, you guys are like destined to know each other. You're destined to be friends and you're going to do something together. And here we are in your kitchen.
Ta-da!
Ta-da! Doing a podcast. And this podcast didn't even exist then. So it's amazing. It's a full circle moment.
It's such a full circle moment. And also, I find it so funny that we're talking about full circle moments.
Yes.
And the man that I went on to marry after years of devastation,
Yes.
his name is Chaz. I've never known a Chaz in my whole life. Now I have a girlfriend named Chaz
Yes.
and a husband named
Yes.
Chaz.
We're going to bookend you. 2 Chazes. I think that could be powerful.
And my friends get so confused sometimes because I'll mention you, but
Yes.
because I just say Chaz, I forget. And they're thinking it's my husband,
Yes.
and I'm like, no. This is girl Chaz.
Girl Chaz, which I'm really the only girl Chaz I've ever met. And it's either guys or it's like Cher's daughter. You
Yeah.
know?
There you go.
It's either guys or not. But it's so amazing to be here full circle. I was driving in here with Douglas today. I turned to him and I said, I just want to freeze this time in life right now. It's like, we're happy. We're married. We just got our new home. We're with our kids. I'm going to meet Lysa again. We've met and we know each other. I'm going to see Lysa today. It's Christmas. I'm like, how does it get any better? And I'm just so grateful. And we've both been through it.
We really have.
And here we are, happy,
Here we are.
whole, and healthy.
Yep.
So tell our friends a little bit about your story and how you went from kind of devastation to celebration.
Absolutely. Well, much like you, I had been the girl that always thought once I get married, that's it. Like divorce will not be part of my vocabulary. And I think there were some very, very noble reasons for that. I desperately wanted to honor God. And I really, really wanted my kids to have that stability that I never had. I came from a broken home. And so I remember during my kids' growing up years that I would often say to them if they would hear about somebody getting a divorce, and I could sense in their little hearts, fear or whatever. And I would say, you'll never have to worry about that.
I did the same. Wow.
And so I felt like not only had I made a promise to God, a promise to my then husband, a promise to my kids, but I had really made a promise to myself that no matter what, like you can get through anything.
Yes.
And again, I think there were very God-honoring, noble reasons for what I did. But what I didn't realize is that all marriages can be difficult. I knew what I was signing up for. I knew this wasn't going to be like a walk in the park.
Right.
I knew there would be work to do. Anytime you throw two sinners together and say, manage finances, kids, and life together, you're going to have some difficulties, right?
Yes.
That's normal. But there's a big difference between a difficult marriage and a destructive marriage. And I didn't have that framework to understand that in the end, I didn't walk away. I had to accept a very painful reality, and mental health is a commitment to reality at all costs.
Yes.
So therefore, if I wanted to stay healthy, and my kids deserved one healthy parent for sure, I had to accept a reality that the marriage that I was in, not only was it not honoring to me as an image bearer of Christ, but it was not honoring to God. And it wasn't just relationship hardships. It was a destructive marriage. And
that's a good way to put it. I never know the words, but destructive.
My friend Leslie Vernick gave me that terminology, and it has really made a big difference in helping me make sense of something that honestly will never make sense. Yes. I remember the number one thing, I would walk into therapy and I would say, we have an amazing family. We have an amazing life.
Yes.
None of this makes sense.
Right.
Like, why would he be attracted to live a double life? Why? It doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And sometimes I still find myself saying that. Like our brains are wired for the confidence of knowing. So our brain is wired to scan whatever environment we're in and to be able to make sense of it, to say, like, you're safe. And that's what gives us, like, a feeling of peace and confidence as we walk forward. But when your brain scans the environment and it says the opposite message, you're not safe, it kicks you into those high cortisol levels, that fight, flight, freeze, or freak out mode.
I feel like I was in that for years.
And I feel like I was in that for years, too. And so my therapist one day said to me, Lysa, when you try to make sense of something that makes no sense, you will lose all sense.
That is so powerful.
And so
true.
I still have to work all these years later. I'm living a totally different life. Yes. I am happily married to a man named Chaz.
Yes,
we already
Chaz,
mentioned.
who's fantastic.
And, my kids are all good. We're safe as a family. Life is different, but different doesn't mean bad. Different is actually really good,
Yes.
all of those things. And I will still sometimes have things that pop up. And I find myself saying, it just still makes no sense.
No sense.
I'll never understand it.
Yes. And I think getting to the place where you say, I'll never understand it, and kind of having peace with that, because I'm like you, I'm a puzzle solver. And I want to know, like, but why? Why didn't it make sense? Or why was that not able to be fixed? Or, but, you can't solve all the puzzles. I read something in your latest book, I Want to Trust You, But I Don't, where you kind of manage people, manage expectations, and you were almost in a position where, because you didn't trust people, you were like, if we just got you to do this, and if you did this, then this would be okay. Like, I found myself in that for years, whether it was the kids, the marriage, what he should be doing. If he just did this, then the kids would be this, or we would be that. And it was exhausting. And there was something in your book that just said, when you were able to let that go and just be like, this is God's kind of mess to handle, there's a lot of freedom in that. And it seems like that's what you did.
Yeah, I finally came to the realization that I was working harder on another person than they would ever be willing to work on themselves. And that's a really sad recipe, because I was exerting so much energy. And also, I realize now, after years of therapy, post-mortem is what I call it, because I do feel like it was like the death of my marriage. I say that rather than divorce.
Yes.
But kind of autopsying what needs to be autopsied in order for me to get healthy and move forward, I realized that I'm a classic enabler. I have a hard time distinguishing where the line is between compassion and enabling. And so because I have a hard time with that line, I was really set up to want to rescue someone from the consequences. And especially when you're dealing with a spouse who's dealing with addictions and infidelity and all of that. One of the reasons I was so desperate to prevent him from ever hitting rock bottom was because the consequences wouldn't just be unleashed in his life. It was going to be unleashed into my life and my kids' life. And so when you weave your life so tightly together, like you do in a marriage, like you should in a marriage,
right?
What affects them affects you on very deep levels.
Yes.
And so I was really set up to be a classic enabler because of my heart of compassion. And because I didn't want all of us to suffer the consequences of him hitting rock bottom.
Yes.
And so
you tried to fix everything.
Yes. And it wasn't so much that I knew logically I cannot fix another person. But I think what I kept thinking is the external pressure that I could put on him, trying to motivate him to change or make him want to change. It was almost like emotional CPR. Like I just kept thinking, if I just keep pushing a little bit more and pushing a little bit more, that really I'm keeping this alive. But what I had to finally realize, like if someone today had a cardiac event, I could give them CPR using external pressure and keep them alive for a short period of time. But at some point, their heart has to beat and quicken and come alive on its own.
Yes.
Or else
Such
this
a great
is
picture.
not a sustainable situation. Never have you seen two friends walking around the mall, one doing chest compressions on the other person and think, wow, that's a healthy relationship.
Right.
Right? And that is kind of the picture of what was happening. And so I think one of the wisest decisions I've made, and I want to say this to someone who maybe you're walking through something similar, but you feel so paralyzed that you can't talk to anyone about it and there's a myriad of reasons why sometimes we feel like we can't talk about it. One of the biggest is maybe you aren't really sure what's going on. And so you don't want to jump the gun and say, I think he's having an affair, but yet you can't prove it, but there's something wrong. And so I just want to say to you, where there's smoke, there is a fire. And my therapist gave me that language and it helped me a lot. Now, it may not be a full-on house fire. It may not. Your world may not actually be imploding and burning to the ground. But whether it is a birthday candle fire or a full-on house fire. You hold your hand over that birthday candle fire and you will get burned. So where there's smoke, there is a fire. If you're sensing something's off, something is off. It doesn't mean worst case scenario, but it probably doesn't mean best case scenario either.
That's very wise.
And so, but maybe you're there and you know something's off and you can't figure it out. Maybe you fear you're the crazy one because every time you question whatever's going on.
That's what I thought.
Yes. They convince you that you're the crazy one. You're the jealous one. Why are you acting this way? Why are you tearing apart our marriage? And that can be very daunting and make us feel like I can't say anything because what if I am the crazy one? What if I am wrong, right?
Yes.
Or maybe you have evidence of something, but you don't know the full story and you're having a hard time figuring out the full story. So whatever the reason is, you don't feel like you can go and talk to someone. So I spent years with this feeling.
Wow.
And during those years, I just called it the source of my secret sorrow. And there was a Bible study I wrote called Finding I Am. And in that book, I was very much in the throes of, I had discovered something was wrong, but I didn't know the full story. And I wrote that Bible study. And if you go back and you read it, I don't say what I'm walking through, but I do say I have a source of secret sorrow. And so whatever the source of your secret sorrow is.
Because you can't even unveil it because it's outing the person, right? But you're still going through this trauma.
Yes. And I wanted to leave
secret
room
sorrow.
for him to be able to heal and make different choices. And I didn't want to invite the weight of public opinion into our very private pain.
Right.
So I waited 18 months.
Wow.
And before I would really even allow myself to verbalize it. But then at some point, it was getting to the point where other people were seeing things. It was going to come out. And in my life, the media pays attention to what I do. And so it was going to come out. So I had the choice. Either I can get ahead of this and tell the truth, or I can let the rumor mill fly and like spend years cleaning up what the rumor mill got wrong. And I decided to get ahead of it and just go ahead and simply state, this is what I'm walking through. But if you're in that place and you're not sure of what's going on, the number one thing that I would encourage you to do, which is going to sound so wrong in the depths of your heart if you are unsure, but the number one thing is to investigate. Go ahead, be courageous enough, ask the questions.
My attorney told me that.
Yes.
Yes.
Now, I don't mean get obsessive and like stalking. That's not
follow
what I'm
the
talking
thought.
about. But yes, but if you smell smoke, chances are there's some kind of a fire. Don't jump to worst case scenario. It may not be worst case scenario.
Right.
But if you're sensing something, then it's something, right?
Absolutely.
And so ask the questions. Ask to see the phone. Ask to have the computer passwords.
And if they don't show you the phone, do you find that that's a sign?
Well,
'Cause I literally had a conversation with a woman last week about that.
Yes. It is concerning. They should be eager to prove that there's nothing going on. If they love you and they treasure you and they care about you, of course you can look at my phone.
Right.
Tell me what is concerning
Right.
you. It should be that. But their response, even more than whether or not they let you look at the phone,
Right.
their response, if it's full of defensiveness, like, really? This is what we're down
Right.
to? Like, you need to look at my phone? What's
Right.
wrong with you?
You're
And they
crazy.
flip it on you.
Flip
they say
it.
you're crazy.
Yes.
They get super defensive. They get aggressive. They
Yes.
refuse to show you the phone. That in and of itself tells you that's not a good sign.
Yes.
On the other hand, if they say, of course you need to look at my phone, hon. I want to do whatever I can to make you feel safe, loved, cherished, whatever. So I don't have anything. If you asked to look at my phone today, I would hand it to you.
Yes.
Why? Because I
There's
have
nothing to hide.
nothing to hide.
Right.
I live a very boring text life. You're not going to find a lot of excitement there.
Same.
You know?
Yes.
But I would be very eager. I would have no
Yes.
problem. Like, I don't have
Right.
anything to hide. The only problem I would have right now is if my kids want to see it because they're going to look at
Their
their
Christmas stuff. Yes, that's it.
But-
Our big dirty secrets.
Yes, exactly. But, you know, if you just take a step back and kind of think about that
Yes.
logically, when someone's trying to
So
hide
true.
something, they act some kind of way. And you just have to make the choice whether to ask the questions, investigate. That's the only way you're going to know.
Pay attention. So you investigate, and we won't spend a ton of time on this, but I do know that there's women that they're like, okay, this is my life right now. Because as I started talking about it on Instagram, on a podcast, people are like, okay, how did you know? How did you make the move? when you start, I was like you don't even speak the word. We never said that. The D word is what we'd call it. But when you finally make that decision in your heart and you're like, okay, what is your first step? Do you go to your kids first and say, and a lot of you have adult children and you're like, I can't do it. I've got a daughter in college. Again, not advocates for divorce, advocates for you to be whole and healthy. What was that first step like of this is the decision I'm making? Because I think that's the hardest part.
Well, my first step wasn't even to step toward divorce. My first step was to leave room for God to move. And in the state of North Carolina, you have to be physically separated, not living under the same roof for a year and a day. Okay. And if you allow him to come over and spend the night, the clock starts over.
Interesting.
So, a year and a day. So I was bound legally to do that. But that year, even though I think that in some situations, that's really not a terrific situation to be in, especially if a woman's being physically abused and emotionally abused and all of that. There's some real hardships with that.
Yes.
But I decided to take that year and completely turn him over to himself. And no matter what he said, I kind of went no contact as much as I could. But here's what I said. I'm not going to listen to the words that he says because he's very good at love bombing and saying what he thought that I wanted to hear to keep up with this. I don't want to say it was a game, but also to kind of keep me wooed in,
right?
So that I wouldn't make a final decision because he wanted me, but he also wanted this other life too,
right?
And so, but what I decided to do as my first step, turn him over to himself, give it some time. Maybe you don't have to take a year, but I took a year and a day because I was required to do that with the state. And at the end of that year, the life he was living made it crystal clear to me what his choice was. That's why I say I didn't walk away. I accepted that reality.
Yes.
And so that was my first step. In that time, though, I also wanted to make sure that I had all of my facts. So without filing for divorce, without making any big declarations or decisions, I just went and got the facts. I went and talked to an attorney. I got the facts of like, what can I do to protect myself, to protect my kids? What can I do in this very horrible, awful situation? And I will tell you, the first time I went and talked to an attorney, it was so life-shattering to me.
Yes.
Because it felt like this horrible thing I never, ever thought that I would do. I never thought I would pull my car up to a divorce attorney's office and walk inside. Never thought it. And I underestimated how much emotional toll that would take on me.
Yes.
But there were facts I had to be aware of. And I'm very grateful that I had legal counsel during that time. Now, just because you get legal counsel does not mean that your divorce is final, right? It doesn't even mean you have to file for divorce.
Right.
It just means you want to have the facts so that you have every fighting chance to take care of you and your kids.
Yes.
And that was really important. And then don't go at it alone. I know it feels scary to tell other people, but you're gonna need other people. Get a personal board of directors. Get some really wise people around you so that you're not having to carry the weight of decisions by yourself, that you can present the facts to these other people. That's really good advice. And that these people should pray more words over you than they ever speak to you. So they're bathing the situation in prayer. These need to be people who get it. Either they themselves have walked through this or they have experienced some kind of brokenness in their life to where they're not going to be pretentious as they give you advice.
That is very true. If you haven't walked through it, you don't get it.
And it doesn't mean that they've had to walk through a divorce.
Right.
It just means that they are in touch with what it feels like to be utterly broken in their life and to walk the road of healing.
Yes.
And so not that they're knee deep in their brokenness, but that they are in tune with the Lord and that they themselves have gone to get some really good therapy. So they're speaking to you from a spiritually and emotionally healed place or in the process of healing place. So I think that's really important. So don't go at it alone. One of the main motivators for me to write the last 5 books that I've written, and I really do feel like those books work together, is more than teaching someone, I want them to feel understood. I think when women are walking through this, and certainly if the situation is that a man is walking through this, because it can go either way, I think it feels so daunting because you just wonder, is there another person out in this world
That's how I felt reading your books.
who
Yes.
understands? And so that was one of my main motivators. And yes, I want to give good advice. Yes, I want to help them along their healing journey. But one of the biggest things, I want them to feel understood. So those are some of the first
Yes.
steps that I would take. And then I'll also add on to this, like, when you've been in a situation, you've had your heart broken, maybe you've been betrayed, maybe you have just been utterly shocked by the decisions of this person that you thought you would be with the rest of your life, and now you don't even know this person, and it's very, very hard. All of this betrayal, and even if it's not infidelity, it can still be betrayal.
Right.
So all of this betrayal can feel life-altering because it is life-altering, but it doesn't have to be life-ruining.
Yes. It is life altering, but it doesn't have to be life ruining. That is huge, because that's what you think at that point of divorce. I hate to even use the word still, because I don't want to be like, oh, this is all about divorce. It's about a life altering change, not just for you, but your kids as well. And I think that is very powerful, what you just said.
And I think the main reason that I want to get that message across is because sometimes when your marriage ends, it can feel like your life is ending. And it's very hard to walk toward a future that you don't want.
Or you're scared of the unknown.
Scared.
It's
You
like, what's
feel-
that going to look like?
Yes. And you kind of feel as though life has changed and it's never going to get better than this. And I want to say clearly, I absolutely love marriage. I say fight for your marriage, because
I agree.
it is a precious union between two people. But like I said, and Leslie Vernick taught me this, there's a big difference between a difficult marriage, which you continue to fight for, and a destructive marriage, which you need to make some hard choices in. Because it is not appropriate to let another person degrade you, disrespect you. You are an image bearer of Christ, more than you're a wife, more than that you're a spouse. You are an image bearer of Christ. And when you allow them to continue to beat you down, verbally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, sexually, whatever it is, that is not honoring to God. You honor what honors God. You do not honor what is dishonorable to God.
Yes. And this is why I love you, because for me as a Christian, a woman of faith like you, going in that direction, saying, I can't do this anymore, you almost feel like you're sinning against God. And that's what kept me from doing it for so long. I mean, 21 years married. I mean, I knew things were off the rails years before. But how do I do that? You know, but that is not what God would want for you. And that is not honoring to God. And I think that's where I finally had the courage reading your books to say enough. And wise counsel, like you said, from friends that have been through it, and a really great attorney and a therapist, you know, that said, you are enough and you don't have to prove anything. You don't need to be degraded. You don't need to be put down. I mean, I think in that time I was probably at my lowest in every emotionally, physically, mentally state. But then there's new life, and you kind of have to get to the end of your old life before you can walk into the new.
And you need to be empowered with truth.
Yes.
I know we were talking earlier.
I didn't believe myself. Did you believe yourself when yourself is telling you things? You're like, I think this isn't right. But then you're like, okay, it's fine.
I was so confused all the time.
So confusing.
And I really did finally just put the blame on myself and carried that for years, just thinking something's wrong with me.
If I could just be a better cook, if I could be a better this, a better
if I
that.
could be skinnier, if I could be funnier, if I could be more available, if I could be
smarter,
less distracted,
yes,
you know,
all these things.
all the things. And there's always room to improve. Like, we're not saying like don't improve.
Right.
There's always room for improvement, but also don't make judgments on yourself that not even God is making on you.
Exactly. Yes.
And one of the reasons why I started the podcast, which we were talking about earlier, Therapy and Theology.
You have to listen to it. I have never listened to it, and we were just talking about it, and I'm going to totally do a deep dive.
Because I want women to be empowered with the truth.
Yes.
I am a firm believer that it is the truth, God's truth, that sets you free.
Yes.
And even at Proverbs 31 Ministries, which is the ministry that I work with, we say, if you know the truth and live the truth, it changes everything. So I had to find a way to get truth along, like spiritual biblical truth along with therapeutic truth, into people's hands so that they could start feeling empowered to see things as they really are. One of the things that I feel like is really important is to not allow people to weaponize Bible verses against you that they simply have not
ever
happened. Really understood. And it's easy to throw out a verse when you're not walking through it. And it just makes you feel like, well, this is what the Bible says. And one of the biggest ones is the verse from Malachi that says God hates divorce. Do you know that in the original language, when the Bible was originally written, right, the earliest versions of the Bible before King James, it doesn't say God hates divorce. That verse actually says when a man hates and divorces his wife, he does violence against the one he should protect. Thus says the Lord.
Wow. I never knew that.
In the King James Version, King James Version is not the first version of the Bible. I know a lot of people think it is, but no, it's not. There are many, many, many more original manuscripts.
In Greek. And
yes. In Latin, in Hebrew.
Yes.
You know, so, I mean, as far back as even the Septuagint, the verse says, when a man hates and divorces his wife, he does violence against the one he should protect. Now, theologians have debated this verse and all the nuances with it. But if you walk up to someone and just say, God hates divorce, you're kind of implying God hates your decision to walk through a divorce.
Yes.
And that is so excruciatingly painful.
Yes.
So we've got to get the scriptures right. So that's why it was important for my podcast, Therapy and Theology, to bring on Dr. Joel Muddamalle, who is an incredibly trained, very smart, very practical theologian. He's a theologian that's normal. That's what I always say.
He was at Haven when I came here, right?
Yes, he was at
Powerful.
Haven Place.
Yes.
And then my therapist, Jim Kress, who also, not only does he have a list of therapy degrees, but he also is a graduate of Dallas Theological Seminary. So I bring these two men together. Jim brings the therapy. Joel brings the theology. I bring the issues and problems.
That's what I do, Lysa.
Works fantastic.
I'm totally going to listen.
But we have done whole episodes of walking through the scriptures that have been weaponized against women, against men who have had their heart broken, who don't want a divorce, but who this situation is kind of being put on them. But we have really done a lot of work to help people fully understand what the Bible actually says.
You know, it's interesting. You talk about using scripture to weaponize you. And I remember in my marriage, that happened often. And Proverbs 31, and I was reading about your story too, was one of those scriptures. And he's like, you'll never live up to this. You know, that's just... You know, and he would kind of mock me as trying to be the Proverbs 31 woman. And one day I was sitting in church and I started reading the scripture, not from his point of view and how I would fail, but God's point of view. And I was like, you know, I see this woman as an entrepreneur. I see her as really resourceful. I see her as really capable and strong. And I was like, I'm not your version of Proverbs 31, and that's absolutely correct, but this is the truth, and this is who I am. And I read your start of Proverbs 31, that was kind of like the way you saw her was different than the way you maybe compared yourself. Speak to me about how Proverbs 31 came, how that all happened in your life, like starting that ministry.
Yeah,
I mean, that
kind
goes
of
back.
A funny story. It goes back years and years and years. My first daughter, my firstborn, was in a baby carrier, and she's turning 31 in January. So we're talking decades upon decades ago.
Yes, it's a long time ago.
And
that's when I first heard of you, was Proverbs 31.
Yes. And I, a friend of mine wanted help starting, she had started a little newsletter, but she wanted help to grow this little newsletter called the Proverbs 31 Homemaker. And I was like, well, I don't really have any tips or tricks or, you know, Bible teaching or anything like that, but I love to do the behind the scenes, like marketing and entrepreneurial kind of thing. So I'll do that part of it, but I don't ever want to write anything, say anything, whatever.
Funny.
And
is that before you wrote books?
This is way before that. Yes.
Wow.
And so but the real reason I didn't want to say anything or write anything is because I had no clue about the Bible. I knew facts about God, but I had not surrendered my heart to Jesus. Jesus was not the Lord of my life. And so I always say to people now, when I helped start Proverbs 31, I wasn't even really a Christian.
I didn't even know that. That's amazing.
Yes.
I love
now,
you even
you'll
more.
be very relieved. I am a Christian now.
Yes.
You'll be very relieved to know that, I'm sure. But isn't it
a
just
very
like...
authentic Christian, by the way, which is super refreshing.
Thank you. But isn't that just like God to say,
Yes.
actually, I'm going to draw you into this ministry where you're going to help other people discover Jesus, but first you have to discover
Discover
Jesus.
me. That's amazing. And you did in a profound way.
In a very profound way. And when I discovered the Lord, after I helped start Proverbs 31 Ministries, the way that the Lord did it is through 2 Bible studies. The other women involved said, we think we should do these 2 Bible studies. One is Victory Over the Darkness, which taught me my identity in Christ. I always thought that I was the sum total of the things that happened to me and the decisions that I made in life.
Yes.
But I finally learned, no, actually who I am at the
Yes.
core is I'm a holy and dearly loved child of the Almighty God.
Yes.
So learning my identity in Christ was crucial. The other Bible study was Experiencing God by Henry Blackaby.
I remember that.
Yes. And that's when I learned how to have a real relationship and experience
I did
God.
that Bible study. Yes.
And through those 2 things, my whole world changed. My whole understanding of the Lord changed. And so after that, I became so passionate because I felt like there are other women who are going through life and they don't know how to connect biblical truth and a relationship with the Lord to the everyday struggles they're facing. And so that became my life mission.
I mean, it really is your life mission. And I think that is powerful. Very similar journey as well. Discovered, Jesus in my early 20s, but really always compared myself to whoever others thought I should be. And then when you got the mirror of Jesus, of who you really are, there's also freedom in that. And I kind of leaned into that, even though there was a lot of baggage that I was taking along. It's like bag by bag, I could lay down and really become whole and healthy through him. And then kind of just beginning an organic ministry, and serving in ministry, and then bringing it into the home with our kids and trying to raise them up. But then there was still this outlet of a community that I wanted to touch. Is that how you began writing books? Like you just had all of this
Well,
that you've learned and you wanted to pour in?
I have loved writing since I was a little girl. And so while other people were doing dances and like cheerleading and all this
Yes.
stuff, I was standing on my fireplace reciting poems to my mom.
Amazing.
This is what anytime I would say, Mom, watch me. It wasn't to do a dance or
That
anything
was your
like
party
that.
trick.
That was my party trick. It's like, I just wrote so many poems. I would give my mom books of my poems for Christmas.
Wow.
One year I even burned the edges. I wrote them on parchment paper, burned the edges, because nothing says real poem like burned edges on the parchment
Yes.
paper, right?
Yes.
But
All about the intention. I learned that about walking through your home today.
But that was really like the joy of my life. My outlet was
Yes,
writing.
writing.
I just didn't know you could grow up to be a writer.
So were you journaling and then it turned into books? What was your first book and how did it become a book?
Okay, so my first book was Living Life on Purpose, which I kind
Great
of
title.
hesitate to even say because I don't want you to go out and buy that book.
That is awesome.
All the people that have taught about writing, I violate everything
Everything.
in that book. And so, and it probably is biblically inaccurate. I mean, I was a young baby Christian. I had no theological review for that book. So anyways, that's the
That
book,
was your
but I'm
first
not
book.
even going to say the title again. 'Cause
Okay.
Again,
I kind of like the title.
I don't want you to go out and buy that
Okay.
book. But anyhow, I had written an article for a very small little newsletter. It was called Around the Home. It was by Larry Burkett. He was a wonderful Christian financial advisor to people. And he had book deals through Moody Publishing out of Chicago. And so he had a newsletter, and he asked me if I would write a column called Around the Home. So I would contribute to this column every now and then.
That's kind of a big deal.
And I wrote one thing that said Living Life on Purpose, and it was honestly the worst article I had ever written in my entire life. But my sister had come to visit. I forgot the deadline. So as we're running out the door to go shopping, they're like, we have to have this
finish
within an
this
hour.
really quick.
And so I'm like, so I just typed it out, sent it off. Now, before that, I had sent book proposals to publishers, but had gotten 15 rejection letters. And I was just like, okay, this isn't meant to be. Lord, if you ever want this to happen, just make it happen. But I can't chase it anymore. I wrote the most terrible article, sent it off. It got published in his newsletter.
Amazing.
The president or vice president of Moody Publishing happened to read the article, called and offered me a book deal based on the worst article I've ever written.
Unbelievable. Don't you feel like sometimes your best work though is when it's just quick and it's just naturally you because you don't have time?
I want to believe that, Chaz. I want to believe that.
It worked.
But that would give me an excuse to continue to be like unorganized, lazy, whatever.
Yes.
No, I have to put some intentionality. That time it worked, but that can't be the habit of my life.
That's probably a good move there. So that's your least favorite book.
You saw my bedroom today. You saw my bedroom.
Which is my bedroom on every given day, which is another. First of all, I show up at her front door and she has 2 different shoes on. And she's like, which one? And I'm like, I just knew we were destined to be
And I had TJ Maxx price tags on one of them.
Yeah.
She goes, oh,
TJ Maxx. I love you even more. And then she takes me into her bedroom and then we truly fell in love. I was like, you're real too.
Chaz, okay, first of all, which shoes do I need to wear? And we even got Chaz's husband involved.
Yes, I was like, Douglas is really good at shoes. Ask him because I can't decide.
He wound up making the final decision.
Yes, point and toe, always.
And then I was like, okay, Chaz, it's about to be Christmas. My bedroom is
I love
full.
that.
It's my hiding place for all of my Christmas. I have to buy Christmas for 20
it's
people.
Every woman's bedroom right now.
Okay, let me just explain. I have to buy Christmas for
Which is
20
awful.
offspring.
That
Do you
is
want me to
terrible.
explain this? I have 5 kids. They all have they're either married or one has a girlfriend. Okay, so that's 10, and then I have 8 grandchildren.
So
that's
much.
18,
Then you
and
have
then
to wrap
Chaz
all of
has
it.
2 kids, so now that's 20. I literally have 20 people to buy Christmas. That's
I'm
my
impressed
kids.
though. I haven't even started Christmas shopping, and we're like 5 days away. So I'm impressed.
There are piles of unwrapped gifts in my bedroom, but I was like, Chaz, I don't want to waste a second.
Come in. I went to her bedroom. She's
There
sitting on
was
the floor.
one
I'm
spot
sitting in a
that she
chair.
could sit. I said, "This is your chair. This is the only chair that you can sit on because that's the only one not."
And then I
covered up."
see her closet, and I'm like, can I go take a peek at your closet? And she's like, come on in and tell them what you call the closet.
I call my closet my revenge closet.
I love that.
You know how Lady Diana had a revenge dress that everybody talked about?
Know. Was that the blue?
It was the
or
black.
The
it was this gorgeous black
long
dress,
black dress,
and all over the media it was called her revenge
was
dress.
stunning.
Which, by the way, I don't believe in revenge, but also I kind of like the same.
I kind of like the same.
So, but anyways, yeah. So after I knew that it was going to be a no-go. I built a closet, and really, this is funny. I really, really like my closet.
I love your closet.
It's a special little place for me to keep.
Like a little haven.
It is. It's just like, it's my little place, right? I can walk in, and it's just like where I have my stuff. You know?
Yes.
But I remember when I was dating, which is another whole story.
Oh, we got to talk about dating.
I never ever
There's so
thought
much to
that I would
talk
date.
about. And that was our first episode with my dear friend, Lysa TerKeurst. I hope you enjoyed this episode. There was so much good, and it was so rich that we knew we needed a part 2. So stay tuned for next week's episode with my friend Lysa and our full circle moment.